and welcome to Quick Hits, Green Spoon Martyrs series on the cannabis industry and all things important and pertinent that the industry must know. My name is Nick Richards. I'm your host. Really happy to be with you today. And I have my partner, Sharon, to join in with us today, too. Sharon is an amazing litigator and a really big, important part of our cannabis team. Sharon, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Nick?
You know, I think we're going to get snow again today, so I've got my sweater on. I'm still a little chilly, but I'm doing all right.
Here it's 80 degrees here in Arizona. Sorry to tell you.
Oh yeah, I know. It's always nice. I know. I hear it. At least we're not talking to those folks from Florida. I think we had a warmer day than they did a little while ago.
Okay, so there you go.
It made me feel a little better. Sharon, we're going to talk about litigation today, and one of the things that I want to point out to our listeners is, we were awarded with Cannabis Group of the Year. Green Spoon Martyr was by Law 360, and we do amazing work in the cannabis space. And one of the main things that allows us to do that work is that we are a full-service law firm. We're more than just a cannabis firm. We are a full-service AmLaw 200 law firm with robust, experienced lawyers in every area of practice, including litigation, and that's why we have Sharon on today. And without that sort of, should we call it an entourage? Without that entourage of legal support, we wouldn't be the cannabis group that we are. And there's a lot of firms out there that are big firms but don't know cannabis, and then there's some small, all they know is cannabis firms. We're both. We're a big firm that knows cannabis. And so we're super, super, super excited about that award, and super, super excited that award really is an award for our whole firm. Today we're going to talk about litigation in the cannabis space. And boy, Sharon, there's a lot of it, isn't there?
Oh, there really is.
Yeah. Sharon, tell us, before we jump into that, give me a little bit of background from you. Tell me a little bit about who you are. Who are you?
Well, I'm an attorney, and I've been practicing for over 25 years. I do commercial litigation. I do intellectual property litigation. And in the last, 3 to 5 years, as cannabis has continued to grow, both nationally and in my home state of Arizona and California, I've expanded my practice into that area as well. There are a lot of disputes in cannabis, and we're not getting into this today, but there has been a lot of intersection as well between cannabis and intellectual property. So I've also developed an expertise in that area.
And I imagine there's been quite a few disputes and lawsuits around intellectual property as well.
There have been, and it's a very specific topic. And what's interesting about it is we all know cannabis is still illegal federally. And so the question is, can you bring a lawsuit about a trademark dispute in federal court that involves cannabis? And can you even have a trademark for cannabis? And again, we're not getting into that today, but those are some of the issues that we deal with in litigation for those issues.
And those sort of unique things about the cannabis industry, the fact that it is still a Schedule I controlled substance federally, that really creates a lot of sort of unique legal situations that then end up becoming problems in litigation, I would imagine.
They do, and it sort of crosses over into state court. So while these disputes are largely in state court, you do have some judges. Judges are human, and they have their own personal biases. They have their own feelings about not just cannabis, but also about the amounts of money that people are fighting over in order to control these valuable assets. So it definitely permeates the litigation process in the cannabis space. And I think that cannabis operators and business owners need to understand that.
Sharon, are you saying that these judges don't like marijuana?
Oh, I don't know if there are judges that do or don't, but I just know what I observe.
Says the person that has to actually go in front of the judges.
Exactly. So.
Very good. Very good. That's why we want you doing the talking, right?
That's right.
Well, and I could imagine when we first started dealing with the cannabis industry here in Colorado in that, 2012, 13, 14 period, we were really concerned around whether even the contracts between cannabis companies were legal contracts. Right. That was one of those issues. Are those enforceable contracts? And then, because of that, I think that, and because of perhaps the where the industry came from, there's a lot of sort of questionable legal instruments out there. I think is that an area that comes up a lot in litigation?
That is 100% true, and it definitely comes up. And in a couple of trials that I've had involving cannabis disputes, those issues have come up. So, in other words, there may be a contract that's entirely void or voidable. There may just be portions of it that are void. So, for example, in some states, you can't actually buy and sell a dispensary license. And to the extent that a contract purports to transfer ownership of the license or control of operations to somebody who doesn't qualify for an agent card or some other issues, those can create legal issues. And those are things that we need to deal with in court.
And that last one is a licensing issue, right? And that is just there's a lot there in the licensing world and for these cannabis businesses, aren't there?
There is. And because, as you sort of alluded to, this industry grew out of an illegal industry. I would say my observation has been, in the beginning, there were some, I don't know, maybe would say shady characters who were involved, and that has definitely created some additional legal issues. Yeah,
some skeletons in the closet, so to speak. And I think that a lot of that has to do. Every state's a little different on that. It's been interesting. There's they call it the traditional market. The traditional market is alive and well in California. And it has been for many, many, many years, right? And so that's been a real problem in California. But we've got those same problems here in Colorado. In Colorado, I think they kind of arrived later in the game. But I imagine we're seeing some of that stuff down where you are as well. It's almost unavoidable.
Well, now that it is, it's been a while that these businesses have been operating. The licenses have been issued, at least in Arizona. And so you're seeing more and more reputable companies and large money private equity investors come into these businesses. So it's been cleaned up to a large extent in that regard. But as you know, these are valuable assets, these dispensary licenses, and they're a limited supply. So there are a lot of ownership disputes, people fighting for control of the license, fighting for control of the operations, fighting for the profits. And those issues regularly arise in litigation.
And those issues really start long before the litigation, don't they? I mean, I think that those are factors of not having good advice when we you're involved in that contract negotiation or whatever that is.
We're not following the advice.
Yeah, or not. Yeah, very good point. I've had that client.
I don't believe it.
And then that just keeps going, and then that just becomes something that's in the background that can't be resolved. And, we've seen a lot of that stuff as well. And, it seems to me that personalities are also important to understand in the cannabis space. There's a lot of history there. And understanding and being able to work with folks that maybe aren't accustomed to, working above board with lawyers and all of that kind of stuff is another skill that isn't hard. It's hard to come by.
I agree. It's definitely a unique industry, but it's also fun working with these clients because they tend to be very entrepreneurial, literally think outside the box, are not afraid to take risks, and understand that there is risk involved, not just in the litigation side, which there's always risk, but in their actual business operations. So the stakes are very high, and people are not afraid to fight over these assets.
Yeah, and I say people quite often, look, you've chosen to go into the cannabis industry, so you must have some tolerance for risk.
Right.
When I'm talking to them about various legal issues that involve risk. And of course, another bigger area in the cannabis world of litigation is the tax litigation that's out there as well, which is where I live more in that area. But there's just all kinds of litigation out there. Sharon, I got to say, I am waiting for the case that will challenge the listing of cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance after Judge Thomas's statements that perhaps Gonzales v. Ray should be reexamined, which held that scheduling of cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance in light of California's legalization of it was still okay because the federal government needed uniformity across the states. And Judge Thomas was very astute in pointing out that there is no uniformity among the states right now. Have you heard about anybody bringing those claims? Do we have anybody challenging that listing right now that you know of?
None that I'm aware of. And I think it's just a matter of time before that issue is decided. For it to come to a federal court and then ultimately make up to the Supreme Court, the plaintiff would have to have standing. It would have to be a ripe issue. So, I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole as to what would be required for standing, whether it would require an arrest or whether it would require some adverse action by the federal government, which I think that it probably would, in order to bring that sort of a claim, maybe for a declaratory relief, which would be, I think it'd be denied. Maybe it'd be, I don't know, depends on where you bring it, but likely it would be denied. It would make its way up. And hopefully the Supreme Court will hear it at some point. But even before that, it could be that our Congress decides to pass a law, and then that will end up going before the court.
Right. Any way you look at it, it's going before the court.
It's very interesting. Nothing else like it, right?
There really isn't. It really tests many of the sort of ground principles of our legal system in many interesting ways. And those of us that practice in the area are always interested in the novel issues that we run into again and again and again. So never a dull moment, right?
Never a dull moment. It's fascinating. Especially how federal courts are treating it, because I'm seeing a lot of discrepancy in how federal courts in, say, California versus Colorado versus Arizona are treating these cases. It's sort of all over the map, and we do need some uniformity. And the uniformity is important because it gives people predictability. It gives them really an understanding of what their rights are and what their remedies are. And at this point,
really good point.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Nick. This was fun.
Yeah. We have a good time on Quick Hits, and it's so great to have an expert like you join us. Any word of wisdom? Okay, so I have somebody that has called me up and said they're going to sue me. What do I do after I have a beer?
Yeah.
Or a joint?
You call your lawyer. You call a lawyer who understands not just litigation, but what it means to be litigating in the cannabis space, so that you can make some really smart decisions about what your approach is going to be, what your strategy is going to be. Do you settle this quickly? But the bottom line is you need to get in touch with your lawyer.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. It's Friday, right? You have a great day. Okay.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thank you.